And Thomas Didymus is a twin,
Okay.
right? So that's what Thomas means, a twin. So who's Thomas's twin? Who's just like Thomas? Well, I am. I sometimes doubt. I sometimes, say I need proof. Welcome to the second season of the Laughing.Mystics, an unorthodox journey through the liturgical year with Laura Lewis Barr and Marcy Mederi.
Oh, hello, everyone. Marcy and I are finally back together again in the sound booth.
And it's so good. It is so good. So good.
I've missed you, and
This
I've
is lovely.
missed everyone else. I just imagine you all, and every Thursday is such a good, exciting day.
It is, and it's really fun to watch the numbers of people listening grow. So I know we say it at the end, but I'm going to say it at the beginning too. Please, please, please share this. Encourage other people to listen, to follow yourself. Now, I had a really interesting experience just yesterday. So one of the people who comes to see me listens, and he was in a car with a friend of his, Zeke. And so Zeke also listened to us, and he knew his friend was coming over. So Zeke got out of the car to meet me because he really wanted to meet the Laughing.Mystics. So he got to meet half. Hello, Zeke. I'm so glad you're listening, and it was really great to meet you.
Hi, Zeke. I love podcasting. It is so intimate,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just reading about it. People listening while they're doing their daily life, and maybe when I listen to us or other podcasts, it just makes all of my chores go so much faster. And if you follow us, you'll get notified every time we drop an episode. So I do hope you will, because that helps us a lot if you're not a follower already.
So, okay, I had another kind of fun conversation with a listener.
Oh.
And she is in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and she was reflecting that on the episode where Lazarus comes to life.
Yeah.
And she said that's how people are when they come to AA. They're bound up, they're a little stinky, maybe their flesh is rotting a little bit like Lazarus, but they are not looking good. And AA is such a spiritual experience that coming back to life, that resurrection is a process that Jesus certainly is, creates. He creates that process. But I thought, what a cool living example of being raised from the dead like Lazarus. And even, the 4 days, which we talked about, which is beyond logic, beyond reason, that someone would come back to life. People coming in who are addicted into recovery, that much of their family probably thinks that they might be, beyond hope already. Not for everybody, but for some. So I asked her if I could share this, and she said, sure.
What I love the most about that story is what you're saying. It's a process. And when we read these parables or these stories, these fantastic stories, it's, number one, easy to slide into that literal feeling about it and forget that there's a story after the story, that it didn't end for Lazarus there.
No. I mean, Jesus says, unbind him, make him free, right? And so there's that process of unbinding, to get him something to eat and drink and to care for him and to help him come back to life.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, perfect story because we are at the second Sunday of Easter.
It's also known as Divine Mercy Sunday.
Okay.
So where we just remember the amazing mercy of God?
Well, I'm not up on my catechism, so I looked up the corporal works of mercy,
Mm-hmm.
both the physical ones and then the spiritual ones. And the
Mm-hmm.
podcast is one of them. It's ministering to doubt, I think, is one of them.
All right. So a spiritual work of mercy.
Yes. All right, I have a question.
Yes.
There's a lot of talk about salvation this week. And so I like to go back to the basics. And the basic is, what am I being saved from? It could be, what am I saved from? And, the easy answer is sin, but maybe we can be a little more specific and explore what, and this one I didn't think about in advance. So, yikes.
Okay, well, you'll need to edit out some silence
Yeah,
here.
yeah. I always say the same thing because it's who I am. I'm being saved often from anxiety. I'm just one of these people that carries a lot. And I think what's under that is, well, trauma probably, but also doubt and a desire to control and desire to have things the way I want them. And so I think as I get older, I'm being saved from that, maybe. Not completely, but.
Well, this sounds maybe a little odd. I think something I'm being saved from, which isn't that enjoyable, is arrogance. And how I'm being saved from arrogance is by being humbled. And I find that all quite an unpleasant process. Whenever I think I'm all that and more, life takes me to my knees and I have to say, yes, I'm not. I'm not all that and more. I'm just me, which is enough.
Mm-hmm. It's Edinger's classic story of we are naturally as humans born into an inflated state, and then life, God humbles us and we feel alienated. I might feel alienated. He says in general, people go through this, alienated from God, and then I am saved. I regain at one with God. I connect with God again, and then I start to forget that it's God and not me, and I get arrogant again in that circle. It's like a universal thing for everyone, but maybe, some have it stronger than others. I don't know.
It certainly is a truth for me. Just happened this week with something at my work. A very important detail, in fact, slipped through the cracks, which created a crisis. And while there were certainly a team of us, I had to own my part in it and say, wow, I dropped the ball here. And I'm sorry. Right. So then it's like once I can come to that, once I can admit it to myself, then I can move on faster. But it's the resistance of admitting that, yeah, I made a mistake. That creates a lot of tension within me.
Yeah. I'm reminded as you talk about the idea of the left hand and the right hand. And when I was in my 20s, I produced and directed my first show, and it was like a huge deal. And I took some inheritance to do it. And I was just like so consumed with it. And opening night came, and I was there early with the key to the little theater space to get set up because I did everything. And I was there an hour ahead or 2 hours, whatever it was. And I locked my keys in my car at that moment. And I will never forget the feeling I had. And in this case, some part of me, and so when you tell me this story, like, I wonder if the, quote, mistakes we make is some part of, I'll say for myself, some part of me saying, you're not all that and more, Laura. There's something much bigger, and if you don't straighten up, we're going to cause so much mischief in your life. It was excruciating. I was praying like my head off and praying to everybody, and I don't know how I got in. I don't remember that part of the story, but I do remember the utter feeling of hopelessness when not only does this thing happen, but I did this thing. Some part of me did this thing. Some unconscious part of me did this thing. And that was Jung's, one of the main focuses of his work was looking at what we do unconsciously and what is the meaning of it? What is it trying to tell us? And it's always spiritual with Jung. It's always a spiritual reason. Freud, it was different, but Jung was the spiritual reason.
And sometimes I know, like, I'm going so fast, I'm going too fast, and I miss a detail. I miss the step, and I trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, good. All right, you're done. You survived the question. So let's go to our first reading. This is from Acts. They devoted themselves to the teaching of the apostles and to the communal life, to the breaking of bread and to the prayers. Awe came upon everyone, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their property and possessions and divide them among all according to each one's need. Every day they devoted themselves to meeting together in the temple area and to breaking bread in their homes. They ate their meals with exaltation and sincerity of heart, praising God and enjoying favor with all the people. And every day the Lord added to their number those who were being saved.
How beautifully idyllic.
And every day, more people started listening to the Laughing.Mystics podcast. So you were saying I overly idealized.
Well, I'm not sure about overly, but definitely idealized. Just that fervor, that joy of newness, of, selling everything, being one. Like, I would have to have a lot of fervor to sell everything I own and live in a commune kind of situation with other people. So I think about these people like, wow, Jesus rising from the dead, and the good news of this new way of being was really real.
Yeah, I was just reading Andrew Greeley, Catholic priest from Chicago who wrote many novels, but he also wrote scholarship. And in his writing, he says, I don't want to get bogged down in the physical explanation and the historical proof of the resurrection. He said, we can look at the early church, and we have historical proof of the early church that a miracle happened. We don't have to worry about that other thing that can never be proven. It is always a matter of faith, no matter what. But we can be historical about the early church and just what you said, like something so amazing happened that the regular way of the world shifted entirely for these people. Their compass was totally turned.
I think about in my life the very inception of this Catholic worker that my first husband and some friends, we all started, and that feeling of starting something new that was meaningful and real. And we spent a lot of time together, and we were always at the Catholic worker house and with the kids, and
But it's interesting. I want to kind of combine what you said just now and what you said before, because I was thinking of the Catholic worker when you said it would take a lot for me. So you guys did that.
But we didn't sell our possessions.
Right, because you didn't experience the risen Christ in the
Fair.
first century. That's my point, is that first beginning was, we all have our experiences of resurrection, that's for sure. But this was a unique time. And beginnings, maybe I'll cut that other thing out and just say beginnings do contain something of the miracle of the whole. So the beginning of the Catholic worker for you, or I've studied Quakerism, and the beginning of the Quakers is like crazy. Like, it reminds me of this early church stuff where people are selling stuff and living in community and like prophesying and, going into ecstatic dance. I mean, it's just, they were related to the Shakers in some ways. So
how do we can we sustain that joy of beginning? How do we enter into the fervor? Maybe not completely, but in some part.
Your question makes me think about like marriages and the beginning of falling in love versus the day to day. And so we can look at these early readings as the stories of the early relationship and the fervor, but I don't think it can ever last like this. The cycle is birth, maturation, and then death, and then birth again. And the church needs to keep reinventing itself. It needs to keep the spirit, taking in the spirit for what is new. And it's hard to do that in a huge institution.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I really appreciated your connecting this to married couples, because something I really enjoy doing is asking a couple, like, tell me the story of what it was. Did you know right away? Did it take a while? Who talked to whom first? How was the first date? Because the people, as they retell the story, remember it in their mind and in their body, and they smile as they remember that first love.
Yeah.
They relive it. So maybe, as a church, as a community, when we read this Acts of the Apostles, maybe that's why it's important to read it and reread it year after year, because somehow or another, perhaps we can tap into it. It's not our memory, but it's the communal memory.
Well, that reminds me of imagining a couple talking about their early time and, remember we had to sleep on the floor and we didn't have money for anything but Chef Boyardee, and like
we had one spoon.
Right. And I say that because do we look at this reading with like, oh yeah, I want that. Like, I'm a big socialist, so yeah, I like this idea. But I don't know if the average person goes, I don't want to live in communal life. I don't want. So it's like the married couple that they're remembering the hardship or the romanticness of choices that they wouldn't want to make now. I want to say that what's underneath communal life and having all things in common and giving everyone to what they need is this breakdown of our separateness from each other. And our world just gets worse and worse and worse as we're able to be separate from each other and not depend on each other, even the way our parents did, or certainly our grandparents had to depend on each other more. And so I think that's the big disconnect with this reading for the culture today, is that this kind of living seems really foreign, unless you're in a religious order I guess.
Or an intentional community of some kind. But yes. And even there, the living together is different most of us in this country, in the U.S., do have our own homes, and it is different. Even in my condo building, there's 6 units, and we all work together, and we celebrate things and share meals occasionally. And we know we can count on each other in the building if anyone needed anything, which I so appreciate. And yet I still have my own finances.
Yeah.
So it's different.
I don't know. I think I'm just wondering if it is sort of like a fruit of the spirit, this idea of, I'm thinking about the Quakers and all these other kinds of communities when the spirit kind of comes in and there's a desire to not be so separate from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm out of practice with that for sure. I like my separateness. Good fences make good neighbors, you know?
But what you said something, that the fruit of the Spirit, or one of the fruits of the Spirit, is the desire to be connected, or the awareness of connection. And I'm not sure I've heard that.
Oh, I'm not
in
sure.
that way. So I just want to lift that up.
It might be. I think of it as a fruit of the Spirit.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I know some people think of God as like that big energy of the universe holding us together. So connection is completely a part of godliness, or of who God is.
Yeah, well, and Eastern religions really emphasize that our separateness is an illusion.
Mm-hmm. I just heard the other day, right, the Einstein quote that our separateness is an optical delusion. What a great phrase, our optical delusion.
And I'm going to tell a story next week that I'm already prepared to tell about this, the joy when I lose my separateness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's incredible joy when it happens for me. So are they being saved from their separateness as one of the things they're being saved from in the early moments of the church?
So when it says every day the Lord added to their number those who were being saved from their separateness, being saved from their isolation.
Yeah.
And today, wow, right? How do we reach out and help people who feel very isolated and separate?
We're so hungry for it. That's how cults get a foothold.
Mm-hmm.
We're desperate for it.
So that was a question in reading this, right? What is the difference between a cult that is unhealthy and what we just read?
Yeah. I mean, I've lived in the cult mindset, and I think that the difference, and anything could be cultish, for me, the loss of self, the loss of healthy instincts of the self is what happened to me. And so that's the difference. If there's a desire to strip people of their own sense of what's good for them.
Yes. So a lack of freedom as opposed to the freedom that Jesus proclaims.
Yeah. And, you know, I've criticized Paul sometimes for feeling like we lose freedom under his beginnings of what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's tricky, you know, as you say, the discerning is really complicated. So it's almost like you'd have to talk about it on a case by case level.
Right. So I just wanted to lift that up and ask that question because on the surface, they might look the same.
Right. Well, the thing about a cult is it usually becomes us versus them.
Mm.
And I know for myself, being saved, being healed is about my world getting larger, not smaller. And so I can love more people. More people are included. Everyone's included. I judge that as a barometer of health, psychological health.
A reading from the first letter of Peter. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who in his great mercy gave us a new birth to the living hope, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who, by the power of God, are safeguarded through faith, to a salvation that is ready to be revealed in the final time. In this you rejoice, although now for a little while you may have to suffer through various trials, so that the genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold, that is perishable even though tested by fire, may prove to be for praise, glory, and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Although you have not seen him, you love him. Even though you do not see him now, yet believe in him. You rejoice with an indescribable and glorious joy as you attain the goal of your faith, the salvation of your souls.
So I alluded to a story that I'm not going to tell right now, but
You tease.
but I'm wondering about that indescribable and glorious joy. And we were just talking about salvation being this loss of separateness. And do you have a memory of that? This indescribable and glorious joy. And I would say not the marriage memories, because that's a given. But I'm thinking about what we were earlier talking about, just sort of opening up, connecting with people, with boundaries being lost, the lowering of the separateness. I'm just like still talking about the first reading in a way, because I'm going back to these people living in the communal life had indescribable and glorious joy.
Well, I guess I just will go back to the Catholic worker.
Yeah.
And there were times where I just would look around and say, wow, I really love these people.
Mm-hmm.
I love what we're doing. And I don't mean just the workers. I mean the guests too, in their funny ways that they were and how they lived and their shortcomings.
2 weeks ago, I was holding the plate for the communion minister, and I don't do that often, but when I have, or when I've been able to give communion, it is a trippy moment for me usually. And you were describing the guests at the worker house. That's how I feel when, like, this silly person sort of being silly comes up, or another person comes up super serious, or somebody comes up looking afraid, just like all the humanity that comes towards you. And there's nothing to do except give and hold them in love. And that little moment feels like the indescribable joy. What else do you want to say about this?
I just was struck by, although you have not seen him, you love him. Even though you do not see him now, yet you believe. And how love, and not the romantic kind, but that genuine connection from heart to heart transcends everything. It transcends time, transcends geography, right? And once we love, we can't take it back. That Dorothy Day would say that connection is always there in some way.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, the themes of, well, first of all, gold, and that he's saying that gold is perishable, which gold is usually seen as the most imperishable thing. So to say it's better than gold, and because alchemy is a big study in terms of the spirituality of transformation, gold was the thing you were trying to make in alchemy. Alchemy's around during this time, so I don't know if Peter is thinking about that, but it does make a very strong case for how precious this salvation is, and
Well, and how precious the relationship is to an inheritance. And we inherit things from someone we have a relationship with. And that he talks about suffering, even though we might have to suffer, which in fact we all do suffer. This inheritance, this relationship, is something we can hold on to.
yes.
It's something we can, anchor ourselves in.
Making a living hope.
Right. Regardless of the suffering.
Yeah, I like that. A reading from the Gospel according to John. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the doors were locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood in their midst and said to them, "Peace be with you." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." And when he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. Whose sins you forgive are forgiven them, and whose sins you retain are retained."
Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples said to them, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my fingers into the nail marks, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe."
Now a week later his disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, although the doors were locked, and stood in their midst and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and bring your hand and put it into my side, and do not be unbelieving, but believe." Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you come to believe because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed."
Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples that are not written in this book. But these are written that you might come to believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that through this belief you may have life in his name.
So much here.
Yes, and it's so John. Right?
Yeah.
It's so Gospel of John because it's so much about believing. And I mean, how many times in the Gospel of John do we hear about belief and the importance of belief and believing?
And that's because
John was written later, and so the people that knew Jesus were no longer around.
right.
So you really had to reach out and get the belief.
Yeah, I get that. And, I decided to take this as a dream and imagined, what if I had dreamt this last night? And what jumped out at me is the Thomas part of me wants to participate in the passion. I want to enter into it. I want to put my hand into it. It really, a dreamy place with this really flips this part of the story. Instead of he's the doubter to he's the most engaged. And I like that.
And Thomas Didymus is a twin.
Okay.
Right? So that's what Thomas means, a twin. So who's Thomas's twin? Who's just like Thomas? Well, I am. I sometimes doubt. I sometimes, say I need proof.
Whenever I think about these readings as a dream, everything gets flipped. And I like that because I want there to be more levels than just it's okay to doubt. So for me, the level is maybe my belief is more active and I want to be more fully involved in the Jesus story. Maybe the way I believe is by walking that path. We all find our belief in a different way.
And so what I'm hearing you say is, right, how cool it is to need to enter into the wounds of Christ.
Yeah.
Right? To enter into that suffering, to enter into the woundedness. Because Thomas doesn't say, I'll believe if I can touch his face. No, he goes into the wounds.
Right.
Which are still present in the risen Christ.
And it's gross, this idea of putting my hand into the side. So again, yeah, if it's a dream, then there's this figure that's putting his hand into the side of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more active, much more engaged in the passion. So the early part of this reading feels very intimate. Jesus breathing on them. I love this much more than, Pentecost is cool. The sound of thunder and yeah, it's really cool. But I like this, that Jesus is just there breathing on them.
And that Jesus says, peace be with you.
I think being able to have peace is the greatest thing. I think a lot of us suffer consciously or unconsciously with a lack of peace. So what actions, is another question for us all, what actions bring me the deepest peace? And for me, silent prayer is one of them. Repetitive prayer.
Breathing, actually. Isn't that funny? When I pay attention to my own breathing, I can find peace in that.
Yeah.
All right, what about that thing, whose sins you forgive are forgiven?
Yeah.
And those whose sins you retain are retained. Tell me.
It just feels like a word from our sponsor, it feels more like a building of a church. What do you think?
It makes me think that somehow or another we are a part of each other's salvation and redemption.
Well, I love that. And so it's not just the apostles or the priests that get to forgive.
No.
Or withhold forgiveness. Oh yeah, that's mystical. I love it. So if I refuse to forgive, that's a problem? How else do you see that? Whose sins you retain are retained.
I think there is a freedom for a person when they forgive.
Yes.
When they choose to forgive. And I think there's a freedom for the person who did the wrongdoing as well to be forgiven.
Yes. And what about the retaining? Because that's what I'm really curious about. If I don't want to forgive, or if the priest doesn't want to forgive, what is it about this retaining?
I'm trying to think, like, if I don't forgive somebody, if I choose to hold a grudge?
Well, we can talk about that, but this reading is saying you have the power to forgive or not forgive. Mm-hmm. And that's why I said it's the building of the church's power that the priests now have the power to forgive or not to forgive. But if we take it in a mystical way that we're all connected, then what is this retaining talking about? Is it talking about holding a grudge? Is it talking about saying this is beyond my capacity to forgive, or it's unforgivable, or...
That's a choice.
Jesus doesn't say, forgive everybody.
Jesus says you have the power to help each other in their others' salvation, in others' redemption.
There's a distinction. I love this because it's a nut we're both trying to crack here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a distinction between two kinds of sins. Jesus is making this distinction, and it's tripping me up. So let me see if I go to a dreamy place with it. Go ahead.
I'm not sure Jesus is making a distinction between sin A and sin B. I read it as Jesus is saying you have the choice. If you forgive a sin, it is forgiven. But if you choose not to forgive or to retain a sin, it is retained. It doesn't have to do with the sin itself. It has to do with the individual.
Okay.
That's how I read it.
Yeah, I like that. And then Jesus is giving no kind of moral comment on it at all. He's just stating a fact.
Right. Earlier in the gospel, not John, Matthew, forgive. This is not consistent with that.
If it were a dream, I think I would be more in the place that you just said, which is the dream would be saying some sins will be forgiven, some sins won't be forgiven. And that's just the way. But the way it's written, it comes right after receive the Holy Spirit. And so it feels like a kind of power that you get the Spirit, and now you also have another power, the power of forgiving sins. That's certainly what the church went with it. That's what the church did with it. So the mystical reading of it is just that some sins will be forgiven, some won't.
I don't think it's about the sins. It's about me. Like, if I forgive you, you are forgiven. But if I don't forgive you, then you're not forgiven. But that's about me and my choice of whether to forgive or not forgive, not about the sin. Because I don't think there is a sin that is not forgivable.
This language is really getting in the way, because what you just said was, if I decide to not forgive you, then you're not forgiven. Or you said something like that. And as the person not forgiven, it doesn't feel about you. It feels about me.
Because we're connected. Because we're connected. And I need you to forgive me for my own redemption.
Why doesn't Jesus say that?
Why doesn't Jesus say that? That'd be so nice, wouldn't it?
So let's paraphrase it then. Receive the Holy Spirit. You have a lot of power now, and the power that you have will impact the people. And you realize that your power extends to giving people forgiveness. And if you're unable to give them forgiveness, that is going to mess them up.
I love the rephrase. Because, and even today, like if I go to confession, if I experience the sacrament of reconciliation and I confess my sins, I am absolutely always forgiven. Sins are always forgiven.
Well, for you, if you're Galileo, that didn't happen. There's a power that is being used and still being used. In certain circles, people can feel condemned for being divorced or whatever.
Oh, yes. And which leads us down a passageway into this big realm of power.
Yeah.
To talk about that.
So what I see us doing, and this is going to have to be like a second program because we've gone on and on about it, is that I'm trying anyway, and I hear you doing it too, to redeem the mystical core. And it could have been that John was just like, let me put this down too, this will be good. But I'd rather treat the whole Bible as a mystical thing, not just parts of it.
Absolutely. And to let the scriptures speak to me today in my own heart, in my own life. And what I hear this saying is, use your power well, Marcy. Forgive.
Oh, wow.
Forgive abundantly.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and we really have to work to get there. It took us about 15 minutes to get there. And in church, we hear it. It's done. It's gone. We take it surface level.
That's why people listen to this podcast.
Well, and thank you for listening. We finally better end this. And I hope you've stayed with us through the meanderings. And thank you. And please, if you haven't followed us, that is my big pitch this year. Follow us. We love you listening, but if you follow us, you will be notified at every time we drop an episode.
So thank you, and until next time.